Barreling into the offseason with the Two Deep NFL podcast, we'll talk salary cap. We know the number, $255.4 million, higher than people thought. First of the franchise tags are out, at least reports are. $21.8 million for T. Higgins. He'll stay a Cincinnati Bengal. The Chiefs have big decisions to make as they try to go for three in a row. L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, two of their best defenders, are scheduled to be free agents. Dolphins are already making cuts. Is their window already closing there in Miami? The 49ers are still reeling from their loss. Will they become the new version of the Buffalo Bills? Always a bridesmaid. Antonio Pierce says he has the blueprint for beating the Chiefs. The Mahomes Rules. What do we think of that? The Chargers plan on running the ball more. Does that finally make Justin Herbert all he can be at the quarterback position? We talk about it all right here on the Two Deep NFL podcast.
You're listening to the Two Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. Two Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Two Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Two Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. We'll also get into the NFL Combine as the guys are coming to you on tape, by the way. People are curious. We always get that question. I'll let you know up front because the guys, Eric Eager and Jeff Chadiha, traveling to Indianapolis. So when this runs, they'll be there covering the Combine. We'll get into the Combine and what we expect to see there. What are the big stories that are going to be coming out of that? We'll do that a little bit later on here on the Two Deep NFL podcast. Let's start with the news. I think it's the biggest news, Jeff. The salary cap, $255.4 million, shows that the NFL is alive and well and healthy as they've exceeded the revenue. Some of this is money that was held back from COVID and everything, but they're now releasing it. So I don't know, maybe it's a gamble on America's health as much as it is earnings, but the NFL's not hurting if the cap's going up this much.
No, not at all. And certainly you felt like going back to the COVID days, you knew that money would come back into the mix, and they just signed some huge TV deals last year. So that's a part of this as well. And it's good news for a lot of teams that want to go out there and spend like crazy. If you're the Houston Texans, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, the Detroit Lions, teams like that who have quarterbacks taken care of and want to make a big move, a big jump in as far as where they're at in the NFL stature, it's great news for you. For the Chiefs, teams like the Chiefs, it makes it a little bit easier to wiggle around with some of these deals you got to do with guys like Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed. But overall, everybody today is feeling pretty good about the money that they have to work with. Even the teams that are in salary cap hell kind of like it.
Eric, I know this is something you've been tweeting about and what the cap means, where you really get the biggest benefit. I mean, who are the big winners from this? Are the teams that have a lot of money get even more money? The teams that are buried right now, getting, a little bit of the digging out done for them. Who benefits the most from this?
I think the teams that are backed up, that don't have a ton of space, that got closer, I think are the biggest beneficiaries. The Giants being one of them. They're now at $30 million, above the cap. Even like a team like the Falcons, who really want to make a play possibly for a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. The Chiefs, Ravens, teams like that are, not necessarily in really great places from the cap perspective, and now can make some moves. The NFL essentially gave them one restructure of a contract without having them restructure a contract. And that to me is more beneficial. The teams like the Commanders, the Titans, the Bears, the Patriots, the Colts, they they're great, as far as cap space is concerned, but they were gonna have to compete against those top end teams for players anyway if they were going to use these cap dollars on free agents. And so I don't think that the extra space helps them as much as it helps the teams, near the bottom that really could, needed to, that extra relief. And like I said this on the Red, Gold, and Bold show, but like, for example, take the Giants who, are trying to decide whether or not they want to keep Daniel Jones as their long-term option at quarterback. Now they like don't necessarily have to like convert Daniel Jones's contract. I believe it's like 35 million base salary that's guaranteed this year. They don't really necessarily even have to convert that now to be operational this year. So they can kind of like draft a quarterback this year, play Daniel Jones this year, move on from Daniel Jones next year without much in the way of salary cap pain. Whereas if they were maybe a little bit more up against it, they would have to have, restructured, converted, all that, which would have made it more likely that they'd have to keep Daniel Jones just to be operational for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, everyone's planning on the cap going up. I would think it helps the teams that are like in the middle the most, right? The ones that have some cap room but now get more. They don't have enough to go splash around everywhere. Because I think the teams like the Bears and that have all that cap room, they're going to be charged a loser's tax anyway, right? Like now they just get charged a higher tax by the free agents. The ones with the most now have more, and they'll just pay even more for whatever it is they go get. But in the middle, you've got more room to maybe grab an extra player. You're already, if you're responsible and good, guys, if it's $3 million from any team, I'm going to the winning team. But now maybe you can get a couple of those guys. Am I looking at that wrong, Eric? That maybe the quantity of haul for the teams in the middle that have money gets a little bit bigger.
Yeah, a team like Detroit, for example, can like probably get one more depth player that they weren't able to get, and depth is going to be more important for a player like them. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Bengals keeping T. Higgins. This shocks absolutely no one, Jeff, but it means what to the overall framework? Are we going to start seeing all, the big names? Is Michael Pittman next? Not from the Colts. Will they be putting the tag on him? I can't imagine with a young quarterback, you're going to let a young wide receiver go, or do they not value him?
Yeah, Pittman's one of those guys who probably be overvalued on the open market, but it does make sense for them to hold on to him, given what you want to do with Anthony Richardson. I don't know if I don't see Mike Evans getting franchised in Tampa. That doesn't make a lot of sense given his age, but I do think he'll have a big market and he'll be an expensive receiver to go after. Higgins always made sense to get done with. We talked about Patrick Mahomes saying what he wants in Kansas City, how important that is on our Red, Bold, and Gold podcast. Joe Burrow coming out and saying T. Higgins needs to be here. That was the negotiation in Cincinnati. Like, however it gets done, we'll find out, but he certainly is essential to what they want to do. But again, I think the receiver market, even though it's better than it was last year, it has to be impacted some way by what's coming out in college. I mean, there's like probably 5 or 6 guys who are legit first-round picks and probably 3 who are legit top 10 picks. And so if you're in that arena, if you're looking for someone to come in and be a big play player for you, and we've seen that happen now, even with guys who weren't first-round picks, Puka Nacua being one with the Rams, that it's pretty easy to go find guys to help you out if you want to go, if you're looking for somebody at that position.
Eric, how about the defensive tackle market? Like Chris Jones is the big name, but he's a little bit older. Justin Madubuike, the Ravens aren't usually a team. I mean, they'll usually walk on guys and take the picks and lock and load with somebody else, but they had to feel like they were right there and could get it done. The Dolphins are already cutting people. We can talk about that here in a minute. Xavier Howard, Emmanuel Ogbah, but Christian Wilkins is out there. I mean, do any of those 3 defensive tackles make it to the open market?
Defensive tackle has gotten more expensive of late. So that is one where, at one time last year, there were more defensive tackles who earned, 20 million APY than there were edges. That sort of shows the value of that position. But I see it being difficult. Those guys are important. Christian Wilkins is a big part of what the Dolphins try to do. Reader's a big part of what the Bengals want to do, but he's coming off an injury. I don't think that as many of them see the open market as previously thought of, but those are obviously opportunities for teams to shore up the middle of the defense. It is becoming a defensive tackle league in a large way because of kind of these teams wanting to run 6-man boxes, 2 high safeties, and still be able to stop the run.
Yeah. Let's touch on the Dolphins here real quick because they're supposedly an ascending team, but here they are cutting Xavier Howard. He's getting up there. Emmanuel Ogbah didn't play. These aren't cuts that Xavier Howard affects them for sure, right? Especially when you consider Jalen Ramsey hasn't exactly been an Iron Man, of late in his career. Are the Dolphins, who have Christian Wilkins living out there, are we looking at a team that their window's already closed? Because at some point they got to make a decision on paying Tua soon as well, Jeff.
Yeah, well, look, they probably have 1 or 2 more years with this current group. Tyreek's getting older. They got to decide about Jalen Waddle. There's been a lot of discussion about whether they need to be dealing him or not. Some rumors about that, or speculation. They are typical of what I would say is a B-level team in this league, a team that's good enough if things go right to be in the playoffs and make a playoff run, but if things go wrong, they can end up being 8-9, 9-8, mediocre. And so I wouldn't say their window's closed. It's just that they've had some bad luck, for one. I mean, when you lose Bradley Chubb, who you traded for and gave big money to, you lose Jalen Phillips, who was an ascending player. Howard's been hurt. They just haven't been able to, like the Chargers in a lot of ways, haven't been able to stay healthy in the midst of this window. The quarterback's been hurt too. And so I wouldn't say it's closed. I think it's just they're morphing into something different than what they were. But they still have talent. They still have potential, but their ceiling is probably not as high as it once was.
According to one of the cap sites, the Dolphins' third worst cap situation in the NFL at about $25 million over the cap. Only worse, Bills, $41 million. Saints, $36 million. Saints are there every year. Maybe at some point, reset Saints. $25 million for the Dolphins. Chargers, as Jeff just mentioned, 21. Broncos, $13 million. That's a bad life to live. About ready and wanting to cut your quarterback and make that even worse. Cleveland Browns, $8 million over. And the Dallas Cowboys, a little over $3 million over. Those are the worst cap situations. 49ers, $6 million to the good. That's the bottom end of it. Are the Dolphins just doing what they got to do? Is this not really a big deal where they're at, or is this just the beginning of many cuts and then walking away from a lot more good talent, Eric?
Well, it's the beginning of making hard decisions, right? Because not only, this is when you're over the cap, and I look at these teams, I look at the Dolphins, I look at the Niners, I look at teams, even the Packers, who are kind of like close to that range, the Steelers. When you have a quarterback on a rookie deal and you're close to being over the cap, that is tough. That means you got to start making some choices. Now, Tua's on 5th-year option, so it's not quite as cheap anymore. But they have to make a decision. I know that there are some people that say they should draft a quarterback this year and move on from Tua. But yeah, I think the Dolphins are in a position right now where they've gotten to 9-8. They've gotten to, this year was 11-6. They've come close to winning that division once now, a couple times. And nothing to show for it, really. No playoff wins. We haven't seen them win a playoff game forever, a few decades now. They basically have to now start to pick up the cups because the party's over. And I think that the Xavier Howard move and even possibly moving on from Christian Wilkins are just a few examples of that.
Yeah, I think it'd be, if they're going to move Christian Wilkins because they're tied into Jalen Ramsey and Bradley Chubb, guys that don't answer the bell every week, that's where you get into, quote, cap hell. Everybody always wants everybody signed. But when you have to start giving up better players and keeping worse players, you got a big problem. Yeah. I think the Dolphins have a big problem right now because it's not getting any better anytime soon with the Tua decision.
Yeah, well, I think that's why you have to draft well, right? The Chiefs have won 2 championships over the last couple of years. Yeah, they got a great quarterback, and the coach is great, but the players who've really stepped in the void have been, phenomenal for them. They got a 7th round pick who became probably the 3rd most important offensive player, right?
Right.
They got a second round pick who became their most important wide receiver. The first round pick was an all pro, didn't have an interception. So it's like that's why we get fixated on the cap this time of year, but ultimately, if you're able to be smart, and there may be players on their roster who may step into that void and help them. But it's what they've been the last couple of years. They're not going to be that going forward.
I want to be clear. When they cut Xavier Howard, that's a post-June 1 cut. So that's not just taking a hit this year, that's taking a hit next year, because he's almost as much he's a little more to keep than cut, but by $800,000, $23,900 to keep, $23,100 to cut. They're going to prorate that half this year, half next year. So they're going to be carrying, $11.5 million in dead cap already on 25 to make this move. This isn't just a cut and let's be done with it and we'll restock the cabinet the next year. They're going to be paying for this for a couple of years. So I think it is a pretty big deal for the Dolphins. We're proudly brought to you here on Too Deep by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire Kansas City metro area. They make parking lot problems disappear. Been doing it since 1994. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Focus on your business. Make a great first and last impression with your clients, with your customers. With Gann Asphalt and Concrete, spots are booking up very fast right now. So go right now to GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lots. Guys, let's talk about the Chiefs. Jeff, you mentioned it. The Chiefs have some decisions. L'Jarius Sneed, Chris Jones. Eric, this is the order of business. You have good football players. When you win, the Chiefs won, and now they got big decisions to make on Sneed and Jones. Should they be more concerned with elongating the window, or is this a time to go ahead and take the risk and go all in? What's the math say as far as whether you should play for a third straight and set history versus keep the window open for the long haul?
I think even Chiefs fans can see that optimizing for 1 year's Super Bowl has never really worked all that well for them, right? So even look at the 3 years that they've won. 2019 was not their Super Bowl. 2022, they were probably the best team, or they were the favored team going in the playoffs, but the Bills may have been the league's best team, and they ducked them that year. And then this year, clearly, I think, Jeff, in the last podcast, Jeff said that it was a remarkable task that they even won the Super Bowl, given with a wide receiver group that they had. I think as much as it pains a lot of fans, I think that they need to think long-term. I think that they need to think long-term about the next few years and try to win 3 of the next 7 Super Bowls or 3 of the next 8, as opposed to this next one, and try to make history, because, if they swing and miss and, they overextend themselves, it's going to be hard to dig out from under it.
Yeah. See the Saints, who every year are down at the bottom of this list. It gets hard because you're like, okay, let's go ahead and make sure that let's try to win 10 games. And eventually you just bottom out, and then you're awful for a few years. I know you hate, yes. I know you hate to give up defense, Jeff, but will the Chiefs be wise in, holding back on the defense? It's been great. It won't be as good if they lose these guys, clearly, but they also need to start restocking the offense. Like Eric just quoted some of your points. Like, you can't win with a bad offense.
Yeah, well, and you can't win with an incomplete team. And so your team is more than just Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed. Super important players, but if this team were to take any important history lesson and apply it to what they're trying to do this year, it's that Tyreek Hill being let go or being traded was the smartest thing they ever did. And they haven't been all in the last 2 years, and they've won championships doing this. So the idea that you should be chasing history, I don't know. Again, we always talk about the Patriots on here and maybe we talk about them too much, but I never remember a time when they said, we're going to win 3 of the next 6, and we're going to, repeat, and we're going to three-peat. They just went out there and played like, okay, it's a clean slate. And it's so hard for fans to understand that whatever happened this year, it can all change next year. You could have more injuries. The ball can not bounce your way. You can end up, the last 2 years, you go back to the AFC Championship game 2 years ago with the Bengals. It's a late hit by Joseph Asai. It's a last-second field goal by Harrison Butker. Super Bowl's a holding call on James Bradbury, a last-second kick by Harrison Butker. This year, it's missed field goal by Buffalo, bad game plan, Baltimore. Not saying the Chiefs didn't win those games, but all those factors help you win games. And at some point, you can have a dud in there. You can have players. You can walk out there next year and Travis Kelce, who was almost tore his knee up in the first practice, the first week of the season. Didn't even play a game. That stuff is real. And so when you start chasing those things, saying we signed these 2 players and we're guaranteed a repeating or 3-peating, I just think it's a mistake. You got to be smart and think about the future.
The one time the Patriots did try to win a Super Bowl, right, was when they lost a 21-3 lead in Indianapolis in 2006. And they're like, okay, that's it. We're going to go get a Dalius Thomas. We're going to go get Randy Moss. We're going to go get Wes Welker. We're going to get Dante Stallworth. We're going to go load this freaking team up. And they went 18-0, or they went, whatever it was, 18-0. And David Tyree pins the ball against his head. And then, the whole thing, that's the cautionary tale, right? Yeah. And they've done things, right? They went out and got Darrelle Revis for 1 year. But they didn't, they went out and got Gilmore for 1 year. Both of those years ended up in championships, or they ended up in championships at some point with those players. But they've never overextended themselves, to Jeff's point.
Yeah. I was going to say, and they should take pride. The Chiefs should take pride in, hey, Juju Smith-Schuster has a ring. Orlando Brown Jr. has a ring. Tyrann Mathieu has a ring. All these guys who are playing elsewhere, Anthony Hitchens, who've come through here. At some point, if you're really doing it right, you got a bunch of guys playing elsewhere who got rings because they were with you.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, change is the constant. There's only, I don't remember what the number is from the 19 to the 23 Super Bowl, how many starters there were. I mean, there's 12 guys. You get to Austin Ryder, who was on the practice squad, and, the specialist Winchester and Bucker. But this team has changed. And if they didn't change, they wouldn't be successful. Yep. If Frank Clark is still on this team, if Tyreek Hill is still on this team, all those things, they're so overburdened with the cap, and they wouldn't be successful. Two things real quick on this. Eric, how much better, percentage-wise, are the Chiefs? Because I remember you said when Chris Jones was maybe not going to play in a game that he was worth 1 point, I think, to the point spread. What is L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones' value just on the team versus off the team? They'll have a chance to replace them. Not with, they're not under the cap right now, so it's not extra cap room, but they would have an opportunity to go get somebody else. What is their value? Can you quantify it some way?
Jones and Sneed are both probably worth half a point to the point spread. So a full point. And just to kind of give you guys an idea of what that, and we don't have these up at supersports.com. You can make the conversion, but even if you go to PFF, right? So the PFF power rankings have the Chiefs at 6.9 points better. A full point drops them basically down to Buffalo. It drops you down 2 or 3 during the course of a season, down 2 or 3 points, 2 or 3 places in the standings as far as teams. So they're it's a lot. But then you have to think about how good are the replacements. And if you get a guy in there that's half as good as Chris Jones and half as good as Sneed, then now it's maybe a half a point. And then, it's not as bad. It's not as bad type of thing.
Yeah. I think, that is, to me, I think everyone would say that Chris Jones is worth a touchdown every game, right? L'Jarius Sneed's worth a touchdown every game. Reality, just that's not the case, right?
Yeah. Mahomes.
When you say 1 point, you're talking about 1 point on a power scale, right?
Yeah. If Chris, so when Travis Kelce went out in week 1, they moved the point spread 1.5 points. I think that was pretty voracious, but it also corresponded to the fact that Chiefs don't have a lot of great wide receivers. And so it's compounding, and those are what are called cluster injuries. But that's about as much as you can expect from a non-quarterback. It's 1 to 1.5 points. So any player that you take off the team, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which is very the whole, it's going to be half a point to a point. So each one of those players is worth about that much. Patrick's worth about 7 to 8 points himself, and then everybody else is worth a little bit, less.
What means more, Jeff, historically? To be the first team to win 3 in a row and get your 5th Super Bowl and maybe not win another one, or maybe only get one more, or to be the first team to win 7 Super Bowls? Right now, the Chiefs with 4 championships are tied with the Packers and Giants. The only teams that have won more, only 4. Right? 5 Super Bowls for both the Cowboys and the Steelers and Niners with 6, and the Cowboys and who am I forgetting that have 5? Patriots and Steelers have 6. Cowboys and Niners have 5.
Yeah.
So what's more, to be the first franchise to get to 7, or to be the first franchise to win 3 in a row?
Oh, I think it's to get to 7. I don't think there's any question about that. And it's going to be hard to get to 7. On top of that, it's just, I think, the way we are as a society, we always want to be able to, pump our chest and talk about our teams as being the best ever. But yeah, it's how many championships in a row did the Green Bay Packers win in the 60s? And no one's sitting here saying, well, that was the model franchise. People forget Cleveland Browns in the 50s. So it's like the idea that how many you win in a row is a testament to what you are. It's just kind of fool's gold, because the way you win multiple championships over the course of a year, 2, 3, whatever, repeats, whatever, is by keeping the same core intact. And that's virtually impossible in today's world. I mean, those teams, the Steelers teams, those Niners teams, those teams were together for 10 years with the same players, the same, 10, 12 key players for 10 years. That's not going to happen. So if you're going to have that kind of long-term success, win that many championships in today's world, you're going to have to reinvent yourself over and over again. The thing that's so hard for Chiefs fans to accept is that Travis Kelce's not going to play forever. Chris Jones is not going to play forever. Andy Reid's not going to coach forever. So at some point when they have a chance to win these other championships, it's going to be new faces. The only constant is probably going to be Mahomes.
Yeah. For you, Eric, what's more significant in there? How do you quantify the history and the value of going for 3 in a row?
Well, I mean, you look at like the great teams, the Niners of 89 to 90. I still remember Pat Summerall going there. We know 3-peat, like that. We remember that when Matt Barr's kick goes through the uprights. Dallas, the slug fights that they had with the Niners and like how good they were. You had New England, of course, has had a couple one opportunity to go for 3. And it's crazy because the significance is that there was really like 1 or 2 teams that had a real shot at it, the Niners and the Cowboys. And so the fact that like teams have not even really come close, that there hasn't been like even a team that's 1-2 and gotten to the Super Bowl and lost makes the significance crazy. It has been so far like a really unattainable. The fact that we went 20 years without a repeat champion shows that a 3-peat is incredible. But again, it shows like how much, and Brett Veach, I think that we've spent a lot of time on this podcast and the other one talking about how well Brett Veach has done at holding his water. Like it shows like, if you're the first GM to I imagine if he trades Tyreek Hill and they win 3 consecutive Super Bowls after that trade, like that is a Hall of Fame, like type of executive. For him to sort of hold his water and still like play the long game after it, it's going to take a lot of stones. But I think that's what makes it tough, because it is truly going to be, the first team that does it is going to be a remarkable football team.
I think Jeff makes a great point about we don't remember the Packers and Browns and the ones that won multiple championships. We did kind of get a historical reset with the birth of the Super Bowl. Right now, everything's tracked. The Super Bowl era is really a lot of it. The merger. Bringing the AFL, bringing African-American players into the league. There's a whole bunch of things that kind of went into that time that kind of reset the NFL timeline. There's kind of like, those are kind of those are the dead ball era of baseball days, right? Like, when the mound was 7 feet high and, you can only hit a ball 100 feet. Like nobody remembers 1887 numbers in baseball. It's kind of when everything kind of changed. The NFL's kind of had that reset, but I think you just look at it and go, it's almost impossible. So why would we throw everything into almost impossible, right? Let's keep the big picture open, and Patrick Mahomes makes you good enough to have a shot at it, but to go all in on it, to be a point better, no, I don't think you can do it. I don't think they will do it. Let's talk about the 49ers. Are they quickly becoming like they're not getting over the Super Bowl? Like it seems to there was a lot put into it. We mentioned cap-wise. They don't have the best cap situation right now. 49ers have the 25th best cap situation, which is $6 million worth of room. We talked about it all coming down the stretch and in the Super Bowl, an all-in moment. That, like, when you go all in and don't get there, it's a pisser. And this seems to be kind of quite the hangover for them, Jeff.
It is. It is. I mean, if you really listen to some of what's being said in the Bay Area, or what's been written and talked about on their sports talk radio, it's this one stung way worse than the last one they lost to the Chiefs, just because they felt like they had a really good shot at it, and they were built for this kind of a moment. And again, it would be serious hubris to think that what happened to the Niners could not happen to the Chiefs somewhere down the road by being an all-in team, because they were a couple bounce balls, muff punt, a fumbled punt, Christian McCaffrey turnover, Chris Jones pressures from having, their sixth Super Bowl, and that's a hard pill to swallow. But twice, happened twice, and so I feel their pain, but I also understand it's a grown man's business, and they had their opportunities and they didn't take advantage of them, and that's the reality they're going to have to face. But they could easily be, we talk about the Bills, and even though the Niners have won championships, Buffalo hasn't. They are starting to get to that point where it can become psychological for you. And how can you get over the hump as a franchise if you keep blowing these opportunities? They've had a lot of heartbreak in the last 4 years.
Yeah. And then you got to go way down the list of their expensive guys, Eric, to find the guy that's cheaper to cut than keep. Dre Greenlaw. I mean, Christian McCaffrey is cheaper to cut than keep, but I don't think any of us feel
all the players that are expensive for them are worth keeping. That's the hard part too. It's like they're not the Chargers.
Yeah.
So what is their path forward?
Their path forward is to realize that Brock Purdy is not a long-term answer at quarterback.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Eric's going on the edge.
Slinging hot takes.
Yeah.
But okay.
Why is he not?
So Brock Purdy, he is somebody else's long-term answer at quarterback.
Right.
Like, Brock Purdy is a good quarterback. Like, we saw it. He wasn't the reason they lost on Super Bowl Sunday. Yes, he was fine. He played good. He's a good player. But Jordan Love's about to make $50 million APY. Daniel Jones made $40 million APY. Baker Mayfield's going to make $40 million APY. You try to add $40 million to that cap table, or you take some of those good players away and you say, "Good luck, Brock."
Yeah.
Right? So your whole shtick is centered around a quarterback like Brock Purdy making, software engineer money in the Bay Area and being your quarterback. Once he starts making Daniel Jones money in the Bay Area, they don't have the space.
So you're saying a couple of years from now?
I'm saying that they should be considering the off ramp for Brock Purdy right now.
Yeah, because it's rough next year too.
It's rough. I mean, this is the last year that they can really compete, in my opinion, without making a drastic change.
Season we're talking about. Yeah,
yes.
25 season, yeah.
And but that offensive line, other than Trent Williams, sucks. And Trent Williams is old. So at some point, you got to have to actually add players to that O-line. The defense is weak out, and Dre Greenlaw tore his Achilles in the freaking Super Bowl, so he ain't coming back until probably when, October, November. Warner's a great player, Bosa's a great player, Kinlaw's a great, not Kinlaw, the other guy, Hargrave's a great player. Yeah. There's not an easy out here. The easy out is it's a lot harder to find all these other great players than it is to find a Brock Purdy theoretically for them, because they've been able to find guys to come in and be efficient passers in that offense. And so even though Brock Purdy has earned, in my opinion, a long-term starting deal for them, the big boy pants decision is to move on from him.
Yeah, you think that's an interesting take, because it's almost like they're becoming the first team culturally to be able to say, we'll make the quarterback disposable.
Well, it was the Dennis Green Vikings, right? Like Dennis Green would throw in Sean Salisbury and Jeff George and Jim McMahon. And as long as you had Chris Carter and Randy Moss was fine. And, that culturally was weird because you had a different quarterback starting the playoffs every year. But It was how they worked around the cap with all those, those 90s Vikings teams had like 8 Hall of Famers on them. And that's how this Niners team is. But the cap is even stricter now.
I brought up the idea that, his dad, Mike, was a guy who revolutionized turnover the running back. Z turn over the quarterback.
Well, they also had we're making AFC Championship games with Jake Plummer. This is not, he should not need. Everybody's talking about how they should want Kirk Cousins and stuff. I'm like, you should want Mike, that Pratt kid from Tulane. That's who you should have as your quarterback.
They're going to be interesting to watch as
JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. We're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you focus on your business, avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Make a great first impression with your clients, with your customers. Go to GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Tell me, the Mahomes rules. Antonio Pierce saying we're going to basically affect the quarterback. We're going to touch him. We're going to rough him up. That sounds great. The fan base loves it. Lots of national people in the media loved it. Referees, I'm sure, took note of it. What's your reaction to this comment from Antonio Pierce, Jeff?
I didn't mind it because if you're the Raiders, you have to do something to make yourself relevant in this division because you're talking about, obviously, 2-time defending Super Bowl champion. Jim Harbaugh just showed up with the Chargers. You've got Sean Payton with Denver. You're really trying to find a way to stay on people's radar. But I also feel like he's right in that if you want to beat the Chiefs, the first thing you have to do is actually proclaim them your enemy. And as I watch this past postseason play out, sometimes I feel like I watch the Bills or the Ravens or whoever else it is. The Bengals actually have the right approach, which is to say, we don't like these guys. we want to beat them. Sometimes I feel like when I see Josh Allen, when he's buddies with Mahomes or Lamar Jackson after the AFC Championship game, he's talking about, what was our first time here? We had to go through some mistakes. It's like, you gotta want to beat them up. If you want to be the champ, you got to beat the champ. And so there is, I was watching some documentary on Larry Bird and Magic Johnson back in the day, and Larry Bird never wanted to be friends with Magic Johnson because he felt like it would undermine his game. And it drove Magic Johnson crazy. I think there's a lot of that what Antonio Pierce is saying, which is to say, this is going to be a rivalry, and we're going to be physical. And I think you can be physical and beat the Chiefs, but a lot of teams don't take that approach. So I like what he said.
Do you have to make it public, Eric, or can you just have that within your team? What do you make of these comments?
Yeah, I hate to bring up moments from my youth growing up in Minnesota. It was when Mike Tice came up and said, "Oh, we're gonna do the Randy ratio. We're gonna throw the ball to Randy Moss 40% of the time." The dumbest freaking thing I've ever heard in my life. Telegraphing to the whole league what you're gonna do. Yeah. I want Antonio Pierce to be good. A, he was an awesome linebacker in the league. B, I think the Raiders giving one of their own a chance after years of turning their back on Rich Bisaccia, etc. It's not going to work. The Raiders signing Tom Telesco to be their GM and then Antonio Pierce to be their head coach and then going out and be like, we beat the Chiefs. We have the blueprint. The blueprint is not to not complete a pass for 3 straight quarters and to hope that the Chiefs step on their junk for 4 straight quarters on Christmas. This is look, if I could still bet, I would bet ungodly sums of money on the Raiders under this because this team has all the characteristics of a team that is going to suck. Just they are. I'm sorry. You know who else?
I don't know, Eric. I don't know. The Raiders are going to suck.
Do you know who else been 5-4 as an interim coach? Mike Singletary, and I like Mike Singletary a lot too. And that guy was a freaking disaster. He handed over a team to Jim Harbaugh that it was 6-10 and had talent through the roof that went to the NFC Championship game the next year. No, this is I held an open mind towards Antonio Pierce and the Raiders this entire time, and they've done nothing but do everything wrong so far.
Yeah.
This is insane. Oh, we have the blueprint to beat the Chiefs. No, you don't. The Chiefs ran some stupid-ass gimmicky play near their own end zone, fumble sticks. Then Mahomes throws a half-ass pass to the left side of the offense. It gets pick six, and you have the blueprint to beat them? Get out of here.
Listen, do you hear Andy Reid make comments like this? Do you hear Bill Belichick make comments like this?
That's the whole point, right? They don't have to.
They don't have to, and I think that is a great point, because I was going to say, just because others don't doesn't mean you can't do it a different way. And so I will stop short of saying, being as strong as Eric is, that it won't work, it can't work. I'll stop a little short of that, but I think it shows. I don't think he realized he let his guard down. Like, it's just us guys here talking. Everything goes everywhere all the time now, and if you don't have your arms around that, do you really have your arms all the way around everything football? I say no. Like, I'm not as worried about what he said as much as it is a sign that it's what he doesn't get. And if he doesn't get this, what else doesn't he get?
If he doesn't understand that Patrick Mahomes is a sick bleep that is literally looking for reasons to care after 4-5 years where he's gone to 4 Super Bowls and won 3, he is insane. That is what I do not understand. Patrick wanted so badly to play a road playoff game this year because he's never done it. Like, this is Michael Jordan is sitting there making up stuff about what people said about him so that he could be motivated. Why would you do it?
Yeah, but you're talking to your team more than you're talking to the world, right?
But their team sucks.
Your team. What's that?
Their team sucks.
Yeah, but you still have to coach them.
Yeah, he doesn't
okay, guys, let's go home. We win. You got to
say it behind closed doors. Don't say it to the media.
Yeah, I think that's the point. Chargers are going to run the ball more, Jeff. Is this the key to making Justin Herbert all he can be?
Yes. Look, I think we all believe that there'll be a better coach team with Jim Harbaugh coaching them. And you can see what Harbaugh did when he was in San Francisco, some of the same things that are going to happen with this team. I've never understood why they didn't do more to make Justin Herbert's job easier. And why Greg Roman showing up may be the best thing happened to him, because it will teach him, hey, you're athletic too. You can run too. Like, it's just, why more quarterbacks who have athletic ability don't look at what Patrick Mahomes does with his legs and say, you know what, that could be part of my game. Like, if I can't find anybody downfield, I can still run, pick up some yards. And it just, like, Joe Burrow does it, Josh Allen does it, but Justin Herbert, for whatever reason, has been either coached into believing this or has thought about or decided he's going to be this type of quarterback who's just Peyton Manning, Tom Brady standing back there beating people with his arm. He can do it, but he's a lot more deadly with a real run game and using his legs as well.
I think he can come close. I don't think he can do it because he hasn't done it. I will give them the opportunity to be a better coached offensive team. And that's not all on Herbert, but Herbert's got some Dak Prescott in him. A lot of games. This is a big one. Here we are. We're close. And you play close, but you don't ever win it, right? Nobody else is going to be Patrick Mahomes and seemingly win all of them, but he doesn't seem to win any of them. Is this the key, Eric?
I mean, I'd like to see the Chargers have an effective passing game too.
Right.
Like, they haven't been I know that, like, that was what Harbaugh said, like, oh, we need imagine Justin Herbert with an effective running game. And that makes sense, but like, they haven't been an effective passing game for 2 years either. So like, they need to work on both sides, because whoever it is, and I've given Herbert more blame than most people, but like, whatever it is, like, they're not a good offense. And so like, they need to, and if they have to treat him like Alex Smith, then treat him like Alex Smith, and maybe he's a supercharged version of that. I do think there are some like black and whiteness to him. Remember how Alex was, where he could not throw on the run. He bobbed his head and ran, or he threw. I think that there's some of that to Herbert. Obviously Herbert's much more talented, but anything to help him play better is obviously good. I worry about this. Like, oh, we need to protect him. I mean, he's like 6'5", 240 with a rope. It's kind of sad that like we have to see this happen to him.
Which one of the quarterbacks, and obviously where they land will have a lot to do with this, but I'm asking you to take your crystal ball out here a little bit. Of the quarterbacks that look like they're going to be elsewhere, Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and maybe Fields won't, maybe he'll still be in Chicago. Who has the best season next year, Jeff? Do you have one that you're bullish on? Is either going to make it work where they are, they're going to stay, or they're going to find better opportunity elsewhere?
It's Fields for me, whether he gets moved or not. I think they should move him. One, because I think it allows them to reset their own clock with a whole bunch of cap money and more picks to work with, and you can have a better situation for him. But if he were to land in some place like Atlanta, which has always been the team people associate with him the most, and you put him with what they have down there with Bijan Robinson and the tight end Kyle Pitts and the receiver, they got a good defense. I've always said that people are critical of him, but they don't want to give him enough credit for the work he's done to develop his game. And he's gotten better every year. And what he hasn't had every year is the same coordinator and coaching staff to work with him, which has helped Jalen Hurts immensely. You get him with a team that wants to be creative with him and wants to help him continue to develop, which I think will happen for him next year. He will continue to be a good player. I think Cousins is damaged goods. I think Russell Wilson has a limited shelf life at this stage.
Eric, who are you putting your money on?
I think whoever goes to Atlanta will have the best season. I think that there are some warts with Arthur Blank and Fields just because of the Georgia thing and not taking him in the first place. So there's some questions there. Kirk's wife is from Atlanta. I heard that his kids are enrolled here, which is funny. So that's
wait, hold on. Because there was a time where every time there was a coaching job open, everybody knew a real estate agent who was showing that coach's wife houses in the town. That was the talk radio, guy just try to yank your chain and say, "Oh, my buddy's a real estate agent. He was showing Jim Harbaugh's wife houses." You have information that they're enrolled or that kind of?
I've heard from multiple independent sources.
Really?
Yeah.
That his kids are in school already, have been in school down there already?
Enrolled, yeah. Wow. I've heard that. It could be false, but I've heard it.
I mean, school is going on. If they're enrolled,
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what be clear.
So, but I do agree with Jeff. I think if you were independent of situation, Fields is the most talented player.
Okay. I think Fields to the Steelers is intriguing. If he could land there, just their mindset of always wanting to run the ball, I think they could actually say, "We're fine with what you do. Do what you do, and we're going to be who we are." I think that's intriguing to see where that goes. But I do think Atlanta with a couple of good targets is a pretty good spot for anybody to land. That might end up being the difference. Combine's coming up. You both are there as this airs. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Is it Caleb Williams and everybody else, or are we going to see Drake May move up? Are we going to see Jaden Daniels move up? What about the quarterback position, Jeff? And what are we going to see from the combine?
Well, I mean, people talk about it like it's Caleb Williams and everybody else, but I feel like every class you're talking about 4 or 5 guys that you have to really wonder how are they going to work out, and it's not always the top guy who's coming in who's going to end up being the guy who's going to end up being the star. I'm very intrigued by Jaden Daniels, and I know that what he did in college, the way he plays, there's going to have to be some patience with what he does. But you look at his skill set and what he can do. I mean, he fits right in with what the Josh Allens, the Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, that new age of quarterback. And then I wonder what JJ McCarthy is going to be or how he's going to go through this process, because as a Michigan guy, I have things I like about him. I think he's got arm talent, athletic ability, but then he didn't have a whole offense on his back. People are talking about him like he could be the next Joe Burrow. I think it's a huge leap, but we'll see. I'm curious to see how he ends up grading out, because somebody may overdraft with him. I could see him being, a poor man's Joe Burrow or the next Christian Ponder.
I think compares more to Brock Purdy in the sense that, was a solid quarterback that won games. Yeah. He won a lot of games on a championship, but I think he had a better team. But I think your point about not being the guy here, it's all on your shoulders.
Yeah.
If you want an upside, it's Brock Purdy. Eric, the quarterback spot in particular, and we'll talk about the rest of the combine, but the quarterback spot, what intrigues you the most?
Yeah, it's Drake May, Jaden Daniels. Which one of those guys is depending upon which sportsbook you look at. I think that it's going to be interesting to see. Like, FanDuel has Drake May as the favorite. Other sports books have kind of closer to even money for those two. I'm really intrigued to see which one of those two guys is going to be the second. May, I think, is May. May is quite good in my opinion. I'm not sure exactly why he's fallen in the minds of people. Daniels, though, last season for LSU, that's the best quarterback season anybody in this draft, including Caleb Williams, has had. So it's a real, but the sack avoidance stuff is a huge issue for a lot of people, including me, because 2 years ago, 30% of his pressure dropbacks were sacks. This year it's 20. Both of those numbers are very high. And whereas, May in his career is more like 16 to 18%, which is still high. Patrick Mahomes in his career, this is a note for people per PFF, at Texas Tech, only 11.3% of Patrick Mahomes' dropbacks were turned into sacks. During Mahomes' career at Kansas City, 11.4. It's a very sticky statistic. And we see it in Kansas City. Why can they succeed with Jawan Taylor? Why can they succeed with Orlando Brown? It's because Patrick Mahomes avoids sacks. Oftentimes, these young quarterbacks go to situations who have terrible offensive lines, terrible teams in general. And, the reason Fields hasn't worked out in Chicago is because he's one of those high guys where he takes a lot of sacks.
Combine as a whole, Jeff, what are you looking forward to?
It's always a great opportunity to see people you haven't seen in a while, people you talk to on the phone a lot. Usually with as the way my job works out, the worse the team, the less you see them. So it's about half the league you just don't go to. You'll spend enough time around. So it's good for that. It's changed a lot in terms of it's become more of a fan-based event, and you don't get as much of the informal conversation, the comfort level. Coaches sometimes feel like who's out here watching me, who's got phones out, who's recording, doing this stuff. So you don't get as much of that, the ease of conversation, but it's still a fun event. It's still the first big thing that happens after the Super Bowl. Everybody gets together, and it's always good to see everybody.
It's also good to get the numbers, right? Get the true. Yeah. I know some guys aren't going to work out, but get the arm length of the tackles, right? Yeah. Start finding out this guy's probably is more of a guard, right? Like that's happened. You get all those measurables, which are not the end all be all, but they are a lot of what helps stack the board. Eric, what excites you about going to the combine?
To me, Jeff said it. It's to see people kind of in their element, to talk to them, try to get an idea of where their head's at. And to network and to like I said, meet new people and get a different perspective on things.
Is there a drill or a position that benefits, that gets exposed the most, that gives us the most information, or is it literally for you guys? They could not be doing anything. It's just a chance to get around all the decision makers.
Oh, it's always the 40 for me. I mean, that really is, especially as the quarterbacks have thrown less and less and done, have been less willing to even engage. And there's fewer coaches showing up too now. Mike McCarthy's not going to be there. I know the Rams don't show up anymore. So if you really follow the NFL offseason circuit, it's really more about, it's almost like a traveling road show now, where these pro days take precedent. And you get to see all these kids in different places with the same group of scouts and PR, personnel and GM people there. But the 40 is really the only thing that jumps out now. It's been some amazing numbers put up in the last few years, and that's the one that ends up deciding a lot about receivers and corners and edge rushers. Like, those numbers get out there and they're impressive, and then all of a sudden you got some stars coming in the draft.
Any drill, any measurement, anything that jumps at you that you find is beneficial, Eric?
The 40, isn't. The funny thing is now, as Jeff said, like, no one works out, and the teams like Drake London just called the league's bluff one year and didn't do a 40 and still was the number one wide receiver taken. And I feel like that's interesting. The interviews are also something to me that I find interesting as well. But yeah, it's an event where a lot of times the player's size too. Like, is Caleb Williams 5'10"? Is a good question.
Yes, that's what I love, the measures. Yeah. I almost think they need to write it into the CBA. If you're invited, you have to show up and you have to get measured. You don't want to work out. You don't want to do the bench. You don't want to do the 40. You don't want to run the drills, the cones, all that. But you got to show up just because it's good for the league. I think I nerd out. Who's got the long arms? Because the Chiefs don't draft. Team I cover doesn't draft short arm tackles. So I can eliminate all these guys. That gets me clicking on sites and, which gets eyeballs, which gets advertisers. To me, it's good for the league. And they need as much of this information to get out as they can. And I think that at some point, they've got to make it a negotiating topic with the Players Association. If you're going to come into this league, your height, your weight, your length, all that is going to be part of the equation. We will have accurate, documented information on this because that's what people are looking for. That's what our fans want. And this game is for the fans.
Yeah, you're right.
And you can't generate money without the fans.
Nobody was talking about Bryce Young's arm strength or arm talent after he got measured.
Yeah.
Wow. How tall is this kid? And do you want a 5'10" quarterback playing for you?
It's a way that casual fans can quantify something. And I think you want to draw your fans in. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the 2D podcast. Remember, free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning with GAN Asphalt and Concrete, the best in the business when it comes to all parking lot problems, solving them since 1994. Keep your lot safer. Keep your attention focused on your business. Avoid costly expenses, delays. With liability issues in your parking lot, go to GANAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Consumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us